Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Windows Virtual Desktop WVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got Pete with me. Pete's the Chief Marketing Technology Officer for XenTegra. Quite the interesting role, and I think a lot of fun for you too, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting the last couple weeks. I've been kind of leaning more on the technology side, but still doing the marketing side. Get everything teed up for all our cool events that we do, and staying busy on both ends. So,
yeah, I had a podcast with iGel this morning, and Simon Townsend was our guest, and him kind of introducing himself as a Chief Technology Marketing Officer. I didn't realize that he had a technical background, but as we started to talk more and more, it was clear that he does. I think it's interesting that both us and iGel come at marketing from the same angle.
Yeah, he's a long time industry buddy of mine, but also he started his role very technical when he was younger. When we all younger, right?
Yeah. Well, especially you guys. I'm older. I didn't realize how much older I was than you guys until you had your 40th birthday a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I think of myself as 20 or 32 still, not 23, but 32 still.
Yeah, I do too. I try to anyway.
On the podcast this morning, we were talking about sub 1 megabit connectivity and the I love you virus, and I want to cry, but certainly the I love you virus. And we started thinking about when that was, and it's like, holy cow, that was 20 years ago when I couldn't get a meg of internet connectivity, and the I love you virus was going through people's address books and doing what it was doing. I can't remember what it did exactly, but it's hard to believe until somebody forces you to think about it. You don't realize how long it's been.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I remember back in college when you could, remember the A-bomb thing where you could, A-bomb a Win95 machine and totally wipe it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of all that, we had a good call today with iGel talking about the value of a Linux endpoint, and we had a good talk about desktop as a service, and that ties right into our conversation here around Windows Virtual Desktop, which is one of the rapidly growing and accelerating products for doing just that in a controlled environment to get out of a scenario where you're susceptible to those malicious attacks and the fallout from it. So I think the content today is to go over the January 2021 updates for Windows Virtual Desktop. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, man.
All right. Number one I've got on the list here is a new Windows Virtual Desktop offer. Sounds salesy. What is that?
Yeah, so I think, Microsoft obviously is always trying to, enhance and entice customers to want to try, right? Try before they buy is what I like to say. And so they're giving not only incentives for customers to pilot and expand their pilot into production, but also giving new customers opportunities to try some of the more tried and true series. So they got the D series and the B series virtual machines, and they'll give you 30% off for 90 days on these 2 series of machines on top of the Linux-based pricing, which is already discounted very deeply for WVD. So it's just a way to get net new customers to want to try. But parallel to that, if customers and clients want to talk to us, we can tell them even deeper incentives they can do to pilot and expand their WVD deployments to their enterprise.
Now, is that in your opinion, is that a desperation thing by Microsoft to get more people to start kicking the tires, or is that a true compelling offer to get people to see the value in it quicker?
I personally think it's the latter. I think it's, Microsoft realizes there's still some hesitation to want to try desktop as a service, a cloud-based offering. So it's a way to entice net new customers to want to, give it a try and see if it can work for them. And I think a lot of customers will realize that it is tried and true, and it will scale up pretty fast. So,
yeah. To me, it kind of feels like, and this is a good thing, when you go to buy a new car and the guy on the the guy at the car dealership says, hey, it's Friday. Why don't you take it home from the weekend, park in your garage, see if it fits, let your wife drive it around a lot. Now, all of a sudden, guess what? Come Monday, you're going to be buying that car.
Yeah, exactly. And then the best part of that is when you go and buy the car and they tell you get 2 months, free of loan payments,
Sign and drive, baby.
Yep.
All right. The next one on here is network security group rules value change.
Yeah. So this is an Azure Resource Manager, what's called a nested template. So they have default, nested templates that you can choose to utilize for security within the NSG, so network security groups. And so they just made some tweaks here based on what I've read. It's to help with some of the errors that they've been getting around, like managed disks and making sure that they're backward compatible. I think this is still just some cleanup from when they went from non-Azure Resource Manager to full-on ARM, aka Azure Resource Manager. So just a minor tweak.
Right. Okay. The next one talks about our friends over at FS Logics, which we've been big fans of from early days that Microsoft acquired along the way, and really one, proved that they were in it, for real, and two, they understood that user experience was important. What's any idea of what they've updated here?
Yeah, so the big thing is this is a hot fix to the previous release in November. So they're recommending that any customer who's running 2009 and the version is 2.9.7621.30127, if you're running that release from November, they're saying you should, and I'll just paraphrase and say you have to upgrade to this latest hotfix because they fixed a minor flaw within that hotfix and corrected an issue that was causing deadlocks with the VHD and storage. So, and there was another issue with if you're using what's called Cloud Cache, it would flush the block incorrectly and then lead to profile corruption. So it's a pretty big fix. So I would highly recommend, if you're on the November release, you're definitely going to want to download and get this updated.
It sounds, you're going back to my car example, it sounds like time to change the oil. If you don't, you're going to lock the thing up.
Yeah, exactly. And kudos to the FS Logics team. They're always updating their software, but a lot of stuff they're doing is just to optimize and make it better. So.
Okay, the next little section seems like it gets a little more exciting, at least. But all this is very important. Don't get me wrong. I joke about it, but it's all important. Azure portal experience improvements, I guess, as it relates to WVD or Azure in general. What is Microsoft covering here?
They're always going to continuously upgrade and update their ARM experience, so the Azure Resource Manager experience. So, a lot of great functionality within this list. You can add local VM credentials directly to a VM instead of creating an Active Directory domain joined account. So the way I read this is you can do non-domain joined VMs, but I haven't had a chance to play with it yet. So don't let me dig into that a little more. Users can now list both individual and group assignments in separate tabs. So in the user, when you assign a user to what's called an application group, it was just users in groups all in one list. So the way, now they're separating the two out, so you can say, hey, what users do I have assigned to this application and or desktop, or what groups do I have assigned to this application and or desktop? So just minor, UI changes. The version number of the agent is now visible. So that's key to understand, especially if you're troubleshooting, if they're having issues connecting into the control plane. They've added bulk delete for host pools, so just simplifying, again, management and being able to manage the various pools and application groups reliably. And then drain mode, that's the ability to say, hey, no more sessions are allowed to connect to a particular session-based host. And you can enable or disable drain mode for multiple session hosts in a host pool. Before, you can only do one at a time. Now you can do multiple sessions. So what that does, that allows you to lock machines, from getting more connections if you got to do some maintenance, or you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
power off the virtual machine so you can save some money, after hours or et cetera. So the drain mode is very key to, as you know, it's like I could log off and leave a session live behind the scenes disconnected for hours upon hours upon hours on end, right? So drain mode solves that issue. And then they
the good news. So I guess the good news is Microsoft is getting this functionality, but for a Citrix guy, I'm kind of chuckling because that's been around forever.
Yeah.
But so we talk about every session, every podcast. They're going to inch away until they get a lot of the features they need.
Yeah. And I would argue Citrix is still one of the best control planes for WVD. And if you go Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Service standard for Azure, it's a great control plane, and it's going to give you a lot more robust functionality. And the two married together is a great solution. So it's not. If I'm Citrix, I'm not worried yet. But if I'm like a Nerdio, now I'm stressing a little bit because they're filling in a lot of the gaps that Nerdio solved. And in fact, I think we're seeing that with Nerdio now, where they're focused more on MSPs now and how to build an MSP with WVD, not the WVD manager anymore. So.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I hopefully didn't come up the wrong way. Citrix clearly is the better way to do WVD than native WVD is. If I'm Citrix, I'm looking at big Microsoft coming my direction and starting to get a little nervous. But absolutely, we got years and years and years of Citrix being a value add with features that you just have to have that Microsoft won't have for a while.
Yeah, I agree. So.
Okay, final bullet, remove the public IP field from the VM details page. So I guess, in Azure world, everything can be addressed with a public IP and access. And I think by default now they don't, or they do. Which one is it?
It depends on your network security policies, but by default it's off now. So you can choose to add an IP. And in WVD, it's defaulted off because it's best practice to do a jump machine into your WVD if you need to. So,
hey, let me ask you this: as you know, I've been carrying around for like a month now this Microsoft Azure for Dummies book, and I am like 5 chapters through it, but that's it. In order to be a decent WVD administrator, you've got to have this basic Azure knowledge, right? Either that, or you got to have a really good friend that's running that part of the solution for you.
No, I agree. You can't just walk into WVD and spin up a bunch of VMs and call it a day. You need to understand at least the fundamentals of, what is a network security group? How does the storage work? How do the NICs work? How do app security groups work if you want to control certain applications? So there's just architectural things you need to understand just to get up and running. In our deployments that we do with WVD, typically I see the two bigger issues is people get a little bit overzealous with their network security groups and they lock it down too much. And then two, they don't understand the whole subnetting concept in Azure. So they end up either building a subnet that's not going to meet their need, or typically it's all networking related is where I see the issues. So,
yeah. Well, a quick plug for that book, Microsoft Azure for Dummies. I forget the author, but it just came out in January, and it is really, really up to date. A lot of what you just talked about with security groups and the subnettings and the VNets, storage accounts, those are all things that were foreign to me, even doing this podcast. And just the first couple of chapters have been enlightening as far as my Azure world. And I did myself a favor, right? I waited till the portal matured. They got the ARM, so I didn't have to unlearn a bunch of old junk. But I highly recommend that book.
Yeah. I actually want to get it just for fun, just to have it as a reference, because I don't proclaim to be an expert. I still learn something new every week. So
I've always thought with learning technologies, if you got the Dummies book or the old exam cram books, if you just had that level of 300 pages of knowledge in your head, you're way ahead of most people. You don't have to have the 800-page massive knowledge. That's for reference. But that 250, 300-page book, if you just have that floating around your head, you're pretty sharp compared to most.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, next topic here is the Windows Virtual Desktop Agent troubleshooting.
Yeah, this is, I mean, again, nothing too crazy here, but just simple documentation on troubleshooting some of the common issues you come across in Windows Virtual Desktop. I'll say this is a welcome piece of documentation, just dealing with some of the customers I work with, because you'll hit an issue and not know where to troubleshoot. So I give kudos to Microsoft for writing this. The doc came out in late December, and yeah, it's definitely a great write up, and it's written by one guy I know, Tom Hicklin, who's a great global black belt. So it's I guess lessons from the field, if you will. So great piece of documentation.
Yeah. Let's give Tom a shout out here. Let's get Tom on this podcast sometime. I think I reached out to him, and I think I caught him off guard. I don't think he realized who we are and what we do. So if you know Tom, maybe see if he'll join us at some point.
Yeah, I will, definitely.
All right. Next section here talks about the Microsoft antivirus, also known as Microsoft Defender for endpoint integration. I want to talk about this for a minute, because I didn't realize until not too many months ago that our friends at Bitdefender were kind of behind the engine of the Microsoft antivirus. I didn't take two and put them together. But what's your take on Defender just in general as an antivirus malware solution?
What I know of Bitdefender, I guess they can't officially say they're the OEM, but they can't unofficially say they're the OEM. But I'll say for a solution that's out of the box and free, it's pretty solid. I'll be the first one to admit I run Defender on my endpoint, and I've, knock on wood, haven't had a issue yet. In 5+ years that I've consistently done that. The only thing I run parallel to it on a scan is a malware scanner, like Malwarebytes or one of those. But every time I run it, I don't find anything. So it's doing its job. So I'll say that just from a day-to-day experience. And you know me, I surf webs, I do everything. So,
Yeah. Well, do you also do you take away your admin rights, or at least keep user access control turned on?
Yeah, I do. And I've never taken away my admin rights. That'd be a fun experiment one day, but that's tying into some of the core functionality above and beyond that. So like app protect, things like that. But yeah, it's a great feature. I mean, and for free, it's not bad, Yeah. Cause let's face it. I mean, you and I are techies, and I don't know about you, but I don't like needless agents running on my machine, taking up valuable CPU when I got to run some VMs on VMware Workstation, and maybe open up Photoshop. And by the time I know it, my machine's crawling,
Right. Okay. So this topic here, where we talk about Defender for endpoint integration, what are they saying?
So it's officially available for WVD. And what's even more important is it's available for Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session. So you can use Microsoft Defender for endpoint, and it will support up to 50 concurrent user connections. So that, not only are you going to get the cost savings of using Win 10 Enterprise, multi-session, you get the benefit of also layering in with Microsoft Defender.
Yeah. And you have to assume that Defender is fairly optimized for the physical desktop workload. And if they've got it, by default in WVD, which you do as part of the operating system, that they're doing a decent job optimizing that for virtual workloads. Is that true?
Yeah. And the upside to this too is it's also tied into the security center as well. So you're able to get reporting on your endpoints as well. So you're getting like risk assessments, how many users are logged on, and then you're able to look at timelines and any issues from a threat perspective. And then, if you need to, you can even do advanced hunting now, which is something we talked about on the Bitdefender webinar today. So.
Okay. And then the final topic here is the Azure Security Baseline for Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yeah. So think of this as like documentation, best practices for, security benchmarks, and they're calling it Azure Security Benchmark version 2.0 for WVD. And just think of this as recommendations on how to secure, your solution on Azure on WVD. So it literally is a list of everything from, network security, how to do privilege access, data protection, posture vulnerability management, endpoint security. So it's basically recommendations to how to lock down and secure your environment. And it's pretty well documented. I was reading it earlier today, and I was like, they literally list out, like, for example, in the network security, they say, hey, here's what you should implement. Here's the URLs. Here's some adaptive stuff you got to turn on, some firewall rules, et cetera, how to properly connect networks together. They go through that and they document that, stuff like that. So it's very in-depth documentation to make sure your environment's secured.
Hey, slightly on this topic, I guess not on this topic, but you know how in the Citrix world, a lot of their work is being done today around analytics, both security and performance analytics. Does anything close to that exist in WVD if you don't add Citrix to it? Or do you hear them talking about doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's under it's a combination of the enterprise, Defender endpoint integration, but it's under the bucket of the Microsoft Defender to Security Center, which I forget the name of it in Azure because it's escaping me right now. But in that suite, they have the ability to do some, I don't want to say all the functionality that Citrix is proclaiming, but more Windows-focused functionality. Like, they're not going to be able to do session-based stuff like that Citrix is doing, the edge stuff that Citrix is doing yet, but I think they're getting there. And then Citrix actually does tie into what's called Microsoft Security Graph. So they actually pull some of the data as well and leverage that data and make decisions based off that. They also pull from Active Directory as well. So they can pull, like, when Andy logged on, how long you logged on for, not just for Citrix, but for Active Directory. So it's kind of a two-way street. But yeah, I would say Microsoft is getting there, and not a knock on Microsoft, but it's still pretty complex. Like, it's not for the faint of heart. You're not going to just go, like, Citrix has simplified it and made it easy. Microsoft, it's easy to some degree, but you can get lost down a rabbit hole pretty quickly.
Yeah. Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine 500 years from now when they say the United States wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
That's sorry. I would love to go 1,000 years from now and look back to see what unfolded if Texas ever became its own state again. I don't know, I'm getting political on you real quick, but
yeah, it's funny because you look at what's happened in just the last 20 years. It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
In our last 20 years, I mean, and you and I have the luxury. We've lived on both sides of the fence, non-technical and technical. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah. Well, and I'll go down a rat hole with you real quick. I mean, United States, the 50 states are together primarily because we're all tied to the same currency. What happens when electronic currency takes over and nobody's tied to each other anymore based on the value of the data, the Bitcoin or whatever, the cryptocurrency, things are going to change, no doubt.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. It's going to get interesting because the Bitcoin thing, man, I wish I got into that early. So
yeah. I'm still staying away from it. I may regret it someday, but I don't know. I'll just get up and go to work every day until I can.
Yeah. So,
all right. Well, Pete, I appreciate you joining. Hopefully people got a lot out of this. We'll do it again next month. WVD continues to move forward. You've got your, what do you have coming up regarding WVD as far as your training classes and things?
So I run a monthly, actually I'm doing a bi-monthly workshop on WVD, and that's this month. And I'll try to get the date as we're talking here. That's going to be on February 23rd, so Tuesday. And then I do an Azure Fundamentals workshop every other month as well, and that one's going to be on March 18th. So I run those two. I go back and forth every month just to keep it interesting. So
yeah, you know what? I need to sign up for the Azure Fund. I'm gonna go sign up for that one right now.
Nice. Yeah, it's fun. I try to show the basics, but then how to build a Citrix environment on top of Azure, and then sometimes I'll switch it up and maybe do VMware one month or just stick to WVD. But the WVD workshop is purely WVD. So,
yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for jumping on. Hopefully, the listeners get value out of this. If you do, share it. I listen to a crime podcast all the time. They always start off and end with give us stars, give us likes, whatever. I guess we don't do enough of that, but if you like what you're hearing, share it with other people. Let us know, give us some feedback.
Yeah, I agree. And we work hard to get them out there. So.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one.
Thanks, Andy.